Hello and welcome to the 2020 television presentation of this year's Remembrance Day ceremony. I'm Loxley Banks, U.S. Air Force veteran, 1956 to 1960.
And I'm Shada McLaughlin from the Cayman Islands Veterans Association, former United States Marines, 1997.
As you may know, because of COVID-19 and the inherent risk of large gatherings, the Cayman Islands Veterans Association, in consultation with the Cayman Islands Government Protocol Office, the customary Remembrance Day ceremony has been cancelled. But with Remembrance Day observances being such an integral part of the Cayman Islands community existence, Cayman Islands Veterans Association decided to use this opportunity to highlight the vast contributions of our present Cayman Islands veterans, those that have gone on and those that are still serving. So in that quest, we forward march. The standard process would start with the marching contingent arrival, followed by the dignitaries and then the royal salute.
Veterans, fall in. Single file.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Derek Bryan.
Right! Red! Cut! Right! And that! East! That easy.
You may be seated if you can. We wish this morning to welcome all of you to the Remembrance Sunday ceremony. And this honors those who served their country in military conflict, particularly during the World Wars I and II, as well as all mariners lost at sea during the long maritime history of the Cayman Islands. Remembrance Sunday is usually observed on the Sunday closest to Remembrance Day. And in keeping with that tradition, we will observe a moment of silence at 11 a.m., which will commence and conclude with the signal gun. Today, we especially welcome all the veterans who are here, because on this occasion we honor them. We welcome their families, we welcome ministers of government, members of the Legislative Assembly, other dignitaries, those representing churches and other community groups who will be laying wreaths today. We welcome also all of you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to this memorable event, as we remember those who gave their lives, those who served for the cause of justice and freedom. We are presently awaiting the arrival of the Honorable Premier, His Excellency, the Governor, and we will begin shortly thereafter. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand, if you can, for the arrival of the Premier of the Cayman Islands, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin.
Right! Red! Cut! Shoulder up! General salute! Reason! Up! Shoulder up! Order up!
Please be seated.
Stand that! East! That is it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and remain standing for the arrival of His Excellency the Governor Martin Roper and Mrs. Roper. As His Excellency takes the royal salute, we want to remind the gentlemen in plain clothes that you please remove your hats at that time.
Right! Right shot! Shoulder! Up! Royal salute! Reason! Up! Shoulder! Up! Order! Up!
His Excellency the Governor will now read the bidding.
Today we come together to remember those that sacrificed their lives while serving their country. Although the COVID pandemic has led to smaller Remembrance Day events in Grand Cayman, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman this year, I am pleased to be able to deliver this video message on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen to everyone in our community. 102 years ago, the guns fell silent and the fighting came to an end following more than 4 years of conflict in the First World War. It is staggering to think that total casualties are estimated at 37.5 million, with 8.5 million troops thought to have lost their lives. On 3 November 1915, the British West Indies Regiment was established. The regiment comprised of 15,600 men, 2/3 of them came from Jamaica. There was no conscription in the West Indies. All those that fought were volunteers. In January 1916, around 300 Caymanians signed up voluntarily to the British Merchant Navy. We are beholden to the sacrifices made by the Caymanian recruits as they defended our freedom and way of life then, and for the role the recruits from the overseas territories continue to play in the British Armed Forces. We need to continue to ensure our young people too recognise the sacrifices made for our freedom we all enjoy today. We must endeavour to teach our history to generations to come. There is no better way to honour the past and to promise a better future. World War I was billed as the war to end all wars. We know too well that this wasn't the case. Our service men and women continue to sacrifice for us today in numerous armed conflicts. I pay tribute to the veterans on our islands and the contribution they have made. The Veterans Association do excellent work to support our veterans together with the Cayman Islands government. We owe them a debt of gratitude. The Royal Navy vessels RFA Argus and HMS Medway have been patrolling the seas in the region on standby to support the overseas territories if needed during hurricane season. We are grateful to the Royal Navy and Royal Fleet Auxiliary and the men and women of our new regiment who have volunteered to be part of a reserve force of Caymanians and others willing to train hard and give up their free time to create additional resilience for these islands in case of a natural disaster. Today, as every day, it is imperative that we continue to pay tribute to the heroic men and women who fought and continue to fight for their country. We are grateful and thank all who made the ultimate sacrifice for the freedom and democracy that we enjoy today. Poppies are symbolic of those who have given their lives while fighting for the freedoms we enjoy today. I encourage you all to wear your poppy with pride. They are, of course, free of charge, but I would encourage you to donate what you can to help support those who fought for our freedom. We must never take their sacrifice for granted. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we will remember them, lest we forget.
Good morning. Today we celebrate Remembrance Day to honor, recognize, and remember those who died in the 2 world wars and other military conflicts, as well as those seamen who died at sea. We also celebrate our surviving veterans and seamen who continue to contribute to our community and our nation. In normal times, we would all be gathered to lay wreaths at the cenotaph and then at the Seamen's Memorial. But as we all know, these are not normal times. We are still in the precarious position of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and as such, the Executive Council of the Veterans Association made the wise decision that in lieu of the regular ceremony with throngs of people, they would instead meet in a small group to pause for a minute of silence and then lay wreaths in remembrance of those who gave their lives for our freedoms. I thank the Veterans Association for taking into consideration the safety of not only themselves and their families, but of all who normally take this solemn and important event to heart and attend this ceremony in Georgetown each year. But I thank them too for finding a safe way to carry on this time-honored tradition. World War I began on the 28th of July 1914 and officially ended on what was called Armistice Day on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, leaving a death toll of some 20 million people. A mere 21 years later, in September 1939, the world was again at war, with Britain being drawn into one of the fiercest battles of all times, and indeed fighting for its very existence. Cayman had many men of valor who did not hesitate to defend the mother country and fight against tyranny, and so Caymanians entered the fray wherever they were able. The British Armed Forces, United States Military, Trinidad Regiment and Reserves, and the Home Guard here at home. During this conflict, the harbors of the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean provided valuable bases for the Allied navies, while Trinidad held strategically valuable oil resources. Because Trinidad's oil provided the fuel and lubricants necessary for the Allied war machinery, guarding this location in the Southern Caribbean was of vital importance. The Trinidad Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve was strengthened with more than 200 Caymanians in its own force, and it is believed that at least 1,000 Caymanian men, 2/3 of the adult population at the time, saw service worldwide during World War II, including in the Merchant Marines. Many did not return home. It was during the war that our own Home Guard was established on Grand Cayman in June 1942 to protect our shores. Many men were commissioned, but there were also others who served duty as civilians behind the scenes. While we were never a target for enemy attack, the U.S. realized our strategic position near Allied shipping lanes. Some of the older ones will remember the establishment of a U.S. base on Grand Cayman in 1942. My uncles Norman Rudolph McLaughlin and Carlisle Burton McLaughlin, both now of precious memory, served during the war, with Uncle Rudolph serving in the Trinidad Royal Navy Reserves, while Uncle Carlisle served on Grand Cayman in the Home Guard. I remember their stories of those times and of the fine men who maintained a 24-hour coastal watch during World War II. While the Home Guard dissolved decades ago, it was those stories that came flooding back to me a few months ago as I watched the military passing out ceremony of the newly established Cayman Islands Regiment. I look forward to future Remembrance Day ceremonies and the participation of the Cayman Islands Regiment in uniform as part of the customary parade. As for today, we are adjusting to the new needs of the times with social distancing and keeping everyone in these beloved islands safe and healthy. While this Remembrance Day isn't filled with the usual pomp and circumstance, it is fitting that we remember and salute those who have passed on to greater rewards, defending liberty and those who we still have the pleasure and privilege of listening to tell their stories and share their lives. I appreciate each of them and their families who made sacrifices and served the Cayman Islands well. They will live on forever in our hearts.
Before the laying of the wreaths, the last post would be performed. The laying of the wreath is led by His Excellency the Governor, the Honorable Premier, and other dignitaries. The wreaths are laid in memory of the brave men and women who sacrificed and made the supreme sacrifice of death in the preservation of freedom and democracy that we all enjoy here in the beautiful Cayman Islands today. We will now highlight the sacrifices, dedication, perseverance, and courage of Caymanians in defense and the preservation of freedom and democracy, which dates back to the 17th century and beyond it. It is believed that Caymanians were serving in Teddy Roosevelt Brigade in the Spanish-American War. The mention of the brigade should raise a few eyebrows, I would think. Throughout time, Caymanians have cherished their freedom and democratic way of life. We now fast forward to the period 1912 through 1919. In this time frame, the war to end all wars, World War I, was raging. And that's the way the war was described. Caymanians' population at that time was approximately 25 to 3,500 people. This provides some significance to what we are going to say now. There were two Caymanian brothers, Huel and Kyvie Yates, from Yam Peace in West Bay, who fought in the British Royal Army in Africa They received commendations, which they only became aware of some 8 years after, when a British warship pulled into Georgetown Harbor to deliver their medals. Further in this period, there were some 250 Cayman Islands seafarers that were registered with the U.S. Army Draft Board. Some were drafted into the Army, while others served in U.S. Army transport missions on the oceans of the world, delivering war material and goods to Britain and Europe. The next time frame we will look at is 1919 to 1946, the era of the Great Depression and World War II. During the Depression, from 1928 to 1939, our islands were practically self-sufficient in food supplies. Then in 1939, World War II raised its ugly head, and Caymanians again rushed to the forefront of the battle to do their part in defending freedom and democracy. The population on the islands were now 3,500 to 4,500 persons. It is estimated that during World War II, some 1,000 Caymanian men and women were involved directly in the defense of freedom and democracy. Some 150 men were drafted into the local Home Guard. Some 350 young men were conscripted to the U.S. and British Navy, Trinidad Royal Navy, serving in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Caribbean regions. Approximately 250 men were serving in the militarized U.S. and Britain's merchant marine fleet. An additional 150 were serving in direct battle roles. An example is Andrew Henning from Bourgesson Road in West Bay, who went ashore on the beaches of Normandy in France in 1944 with the 101st U.S. Army Division and fought their way across Europe to the River Rhine and Berlin, taking some 11 months to subdue the German army. With some 1,000 men and women involved directly in World War II efforts, it is believed that the Cayman Islands had the highest percentage of its population of any country in the world defending freedom and democracy during one of the most perilous times humanity has ever experienced.
We move now from 1947 to 1990, which saw the Korean War, the Cold War, and Vietnam War, with Caymanians now directly involved in the freedom fight for democracy. Victor Ebanks, Keith Bodden, Osley Ebanks, Kelsey Wallace, Keith Yates, Dale Banks, Raoul Smith, Loxley Banks.
Paul Ebanks. I am Vice President of SEVA, and I served for 9 years in Her Majesty's Royal Marines.
Rudi Kudrycki, I'm retired from the German Air Force in 1989 as a lieutenant colonel. I was flying all kinds of different airplanes and fighter jets, and after my retirement I went for 7 years to the United Arab Emirates and did basically the same thing there. 1995 I came to the Cayman Islands, met my wife, and we married 5 years later in St. Moritz. I'm still flying, and if you see a small white and blue aircraft over the island, that's me.
It's Gerald Hardy. I was in the U.S. Army, late 60s. I was a paratrooper, a military policeman. I was in the infantry, and I was an advisor to a Vietnamese parachute regiment. I was only in for 2 years. I was drafted. More than half of it was in Vietnam, though.
Victor and Keith served in Korea whilst others were deployed in Germany, Japan, the UK, and the wider Pacific region. Loxley Banks was assigned in 1958 to a Joint Task Force 7 consisting of the U.S. and all the NATO allies on a 6,000-foot long and 2,300-foot wide island, which also accommodated Johnston Island Air Force Base. The task force mission was to conduct a nuclear high atmospheric test looking at the result of a concentrated megaton nuclear explosion in the atmosphere. Loxley is one of the few persons alive to have viewed and experienced the heat from a megaton nuclear explosion. Since 1990 to present time, there were a variety of conflicts in which Caymanians were involved, such as the Gulf War, Afghanistan War, Iraq War, and others, examples of which include
Shane Bothwell. I spent 12 years in the U.S. Army, assigned to 2nd Infantry Division, 101st Airborne Division, and Special Operations Command, serving both Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Middle East in general.
Andrew McLaughlin. I served as a United States Marine for 22 years and retired as a Master Sergeant of Marines. So during the Bosnian conflict, the Marine Air Group that I was with took 11 F-18 Deltas to northern Italy for bombing runs into Bosnian territories.
May I invite us to stand for the playing of the Reveille.
O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home, under the shadow of thy throne, still secure, sufficient is thine arm alone, and our defense is sure. Before the hills in order stood, or earth received her frame, from everlasting thou art God, to endless years the same. A thousand ages in thy sight are like an evening dawn. Short as the watch that ends the night before the rising sun. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, be thou our guide while life shall last, and our eternal home.
The offering collected is used in support of Cayman Islands veterans in need and their families. Your contributions can be made in conjunction with the Poppy Appeal or through your pastor or any Cayman Islands veteran. On your screen, you will also see options to send your contributions by direct mail or directly depositing in the Cayman Islands Veterans Association bank account.
Let's pray together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Let us stand now for the singing of our national anthem.
God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
We will end now with the royal salute, the general salute, and the march past.
Shoulder up! General salute, reason! Up! Shoulder up! Order up! Stand at ease. Stand easy.
Departure of the Commissioner of Police.
Hey! Hey! Stand! Thank you, sir. Ready! Close order, march! Shoulder, arms! Move to the right and forward! Right, right!
Please remain in your places. The parade will return very shortly to salute the veterans in the march past. Afterwards, you may be dismissed. Thank you very much.
Veterans, fall out, fall in behind them.
Man left! Quick, march! go.
The parade this morning comprises of contingents representing the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, the Cayman Islands Fire Service, Her Majesty's Prison Service, the Girls Brigade, the Cayman Islands Scouting Association, the Cayman Islands Cadet Corps, the Pathfinders, Lions Club of Grand Cayman, Lions Club of Tropical Gardens, and the Cayman Islands Veterans Association.
We thank you for joining us to celebrate and remember our war heroes and those who served in the defense of freedom and democracy.